So welcome to Wendy's Designs. This is a live show with live pupils on a Thursday. It's recorded for Ustream.tv and also for YouTube for people to watch at their leisure. Excuse me, squeaky voice. So it wouldn't help even if I had a fantastic microphone. I'd still found. I think it's just my voice that sounds squeaky. I'm playing with my Derwent watercolour pencils, but I'm using them a bit differently. I'm using them as a fine watercolour paint rather than a pencil. So I'm using a paper palette. So instead of using colours and mixing them on a palette, these are professional watercolours, I'm scratching colours and mixing them on a paper palette. You can do this on a big scale or a small scale. I've also got my Art Master Pearl Series 11. I've got a number 6 and I've got a number 2. And then I have two Series 55 Art Master Pearls. I've got a 5.0 and a 10.0, so they're kind of really fine. And I've got them in my water pot. So what I was just doing is just playing and mixing a bit of colour. So I've got my damp baby wipe because I'm using these differently, but I do like the dampness is just probably about right, so you don't flood the paper, because I don't really want to flood the paper. I just want to make a colour. So I'm trying to find the favourite mushroom colour. So this one is vermilion, I think, which was a little bit kind of paler. Deep vermilion, number 14. If I label things, I know what they are. And then the next one, I think, was Geranium Lake, which was number 15. And I think I like this one. I think this is kind of mushroomy colour. From rich to kind of pale. So you can either scratch it on, I've made a little bit of a wash here, so I'm going to do them in 3 different ways. I'm going to do one wet, I'm going to do one dry, and then I'm going to do one where I scratch the colour actually onto the paper. So there's 3 different ways to use these. Well, there's many different ways, but there's 3 basic ways. So I have Madder Carmine, which is this one, and that one is number 19. This one was number 15. And then, of course, one of my favourites is Burnt Carmine, number 65. And that's kind of the really, really rich, deep colour. So on my practice, which I think is on the other side here, I've made a really dark purple with Elysian Crimson and French Ultramarine. And that was my deep purple. But if you look at Burnt Carmine, it's very similar. So if you haven't got Burnt Carmine, you can make it with French Ultramarine and Elysian Crimson. So I'll just have a quick play with this and take this one down. So when you take it back from its really strong strength, it's too weak, it's too pinky to be a ready kind of mushroom colour. And again, I think I kind of like this one, but something in between these two. So that's going to take number 15, sorry, Madder Carmine, which is number 19, and I can do 2 things. And that one is number 15, which is Geranium Lake. So we can work 2 ways. We can mix these 2 together. And again, I think that's kind of a nice mushroomy colour. or that was number 15. We can mix that on top. And now when I mix it, I'm going to get the mix already. I have to work a little bit. I'm out of practice working with these. So I think that's quite a nice toadstool colour. And if we take it very pale, it's quite nice, is that one? I think I actually like it a little bit redder. It's just a bit too pink, I think. So I'm going to do number 15. Then I'm going to do a layer of number 19. And then I'm going to do another layer of 15. And we'll see what that does. Now, even though this paper palette will dry, I can still reactivate it. And if you put that one next to that one, you'll see it's just a bit cooler. Not much, but just a bit. So if I'm mixing this colour, I want slightly more 15 than I do 19. And I think that's quite a nice colour. But I then want to kind of get some carmine in there, so that, you know, if we had a mushroom, I kind of want to put a bit of dark in. So by just doing a little tiny one and having a play, you can get quite a nice effect. And if you wet, oopsie, always twist it to a point. If you wet this and, oopsie, sorry, use a dry tissue, you can lift it off so you can make a highlight. So lifting off watercolour is not impossible. So if you think, oh, actually I'd like that to be lighter, you can put a highlight on it. And if it's good quality paper, you can keep working in there, so you can work backwards if you want again. Get a bit more of that colour back in. Clean dry tissue or kitchen paper until you're happy with what you're doing. Now obviously you're not going to have your colours on your paper. And then I lost my little curls, so if I go really dark, I've got my little curls. Oops, too much water. I can just drop a bit of natural red into there. So I've got a little bit of... So that's one way you can work. Now I don't really like that way because it's not controlled and it's not as detailed as I'd like. So it's a traditional watercolour way, is that. So I've just scribbled 3 little mushrooms down here. And it's the back of the other ones that I can play. This was wet on wet, and I didn't really like that one either. Now, one thing I might just do is, again, practice with masking fluid because I'm again out of practice, so I've got a little. And this is quite new, this, so what I might do is use my little dish, which I thought was handy. I have this bigger one, this will do. Just going to pour a little bit in there, just a drop, not very much at all. And then put the lid on because I am prone to spill. Now, I think this is, oh goodness gracious, that was a silly thing to do, I think. Never mind, oopsie. I'll use it from here. I'll zoom in a bit and then we can see how not to spill masking fluid. So I'm just dipping into that. So let me just put that there, see if we can. Oh, that looks a bit better. So I'm going to be using there's no reason why I don't have to use it up there because I just want some little tiny dots. They are kind of really diddy, these. And you just kind of use the point just very carefully. Now, they're not kind of splodges. So I shall do this one in dots, and again this is a practice, so you can get some quite fine dots if you want. And I'm using a colour shaper because originally I saw them for using on masking fluid because you ruin your brushes. Now if you don't have a colour shaper you can dot with a very old brush or you can use the end of a brush. Don't for goodness sake use your best brushes because they will be trashed. So there's some little tiny dots on that one. Real tiny dots. This one I'm kind of going to go on the side to do a few splodges because again I'm not really sure of the shape I want these little white marks to be. I don't think I want circles, so I might go with splodges, and I want kind of some bigger than the others really. And it has to look a little bit random, you know, this is a wild toadstool. There's some snoring going on under the table, apologies. Alf Master is fast asleep, bless him. Oh, I think I like that one. I think I like that one, so excuse me. So again, can be a little bit bolder and use even bigger ones. And the trick with masking fluid is you have to make sure it's completely dry. Because if you rub, I'll put water on it, it will trash your page. So you've got to make sure it's dry. Just put a few more little dots on that one. Now I do have and I'm not going to worry that I've spilt this, because if you look at it now, it's drying and it's going to make a nice eraser, because there's nothing better to get masking fluid from anywhere. I'm just going to let that dry actually, because it's not quite dry, so I should do as I say, not as I do. Right, let that dry for a minute or two. And as you can see, they're going to take a minute. Oops, they're going to take a minute or two. Oopsie, sorry. Why have I suddenly gone flashed? They are going to take a minute or two to dry, because some are quite splodgy. Some have dried and some are still kind of wet. So I'm just going to put them on the top and just put another light on. So the other way to use this brush is so if we have, just take that bit off there as well. It doesn't come off paintbrushes that easily, so as I say, for goodness sake, don't use your best paintbrushes. So what you could also do is kind of do the mushroom shape. And then we can scrape some white in there on the top. So there's lots of different ways that you can use this. Oopsie. And then we've got the final, and what you probably could do is, it's not touching it, so we have colour stuck to the water, just where the water is. And then what we can do is I'll probably go in with this is a number 2 Art Master Pearl Series 2, so it's quite small, is this. And we've got some white in here. But the colour has already been mixed, so all you're doing is just giving it a little bit of, and I drew it in water, I didn't draw it in if you want to kind of get a nicer blend, you can add some more water to it if you wanted to kind of get that nice. There's all sorts of ways you can do, and if you want a bit more darker down there, you can scrape a bit more of the burnt carmine. You've just got to make sure that it's wet. You can see where the little bits have stuck. You can just manipulate those in. So that's another way to scratch the colour. And so you can leave that to dry. No, really you would probably leave that to dry. And I just need to mask. Just going to mask out the window of our pretend mushroom. And it is quite good at being precise. So again, just take that little bit of dried off and just bob it into the top there. Oops. Now that's a bit wet, so I'm going to have to leave that just to dry. So again, I'm going to put that up there. Hopefully that will dry on that lamp. So this one's dried now. So all this masking fluid can be rubbed into a small eraser. And if you're clever enough to rub it together, you will end up like a very rough looking eraser. Kind of a yucky colour. But what this is magic, because you've got fingers. No, I hadn't left it to dry earlier, so I've damaged my paper, but that's okay. So that's why you have to let it dry completely. And again, some of the big blobs are still wet. Sorry about that. It's doing its usual nasty trick. If I put that across there. So I'm going to keep that little bit of razor, and then I'm going to use it to take off that. But this is what happens if you rub when it's not dried. I didn't damage the top of the paper, it was the underneath bit, so you have to let it dry. So you've got to be a bit patient. Now this is slightly damp. You can see it's just a bit wet. It's dried on the top, but the dark red is a bit damp. But the masking fluid isn't wet at the moment, so what I can do is take my brush. Make sure I've got just water, and I've got a few specks of red, so I should have really got rid of those. And then a little mushroom goes something like that. Now this is quite thick watercolour paper that I'm practicing on. It's £140, but if you haven't stretched, you need to stretch it first, and then you won't have a problem. Now this is a little bit of an upright one, so again you've got to keep it quite wet, because we're going to have some colours going in here now. So unlike other watercolours, we can scratch in as many colours as we want. So I had 4 colours here, 4 reds, and I can have this a bit darker up here, a little bit of a light bit down there. Now if you want to do stones, you can curl pieces off, but I just want really fine specks. And I'll tell you what the colours are in a second, because I can't mess about because this is wet. But you can put as many colours as you want on here. Which is something you can't really do with other watercolours because you'll get mud. Now we do want some fine bits. We'll just throw in a little bit of dark at the top, up there. Just a little bit if we had a shadow on that one, down there. And then we go. And it's just stopped where the water was. And then I'm gonna go in there with quite a fine little brush now. My 10-0 Pearl Art Master 55. And just manipulate those colours together. Sorry, there could be a bark alert. I have no idea why. Sorry about that. I'm actually going to use my number 2 Art Master because it's got a bit more water to it, but it has a fine point. And we're just kind of manipulating those colours together. And then that dark one is suddenly taking over and creating a nice soft shadow. And I'm going to work down here. Clean water, because this is the palest side. And of course you couldn't make this colour again because you have such an array of 6 different colours, maybe 7. But you can know what the colours are. So without doing too much, we've created quite a nice little toadstool. Now you want a dry brush, and again I haven't done this before, but I'm just going to get rid of, I may have to just waste that little bit because it's going to have colour on it. So so the next thing to do, so those colours for the toadstool were Number Primrose Yellow number 4, Middle Chrome number 8, and these are the Derwent watercolour pencils. And then we had 57 Brown Ochre, 58 Raw Sienna, 59 Golden Brown, and 61 Copper Beech. So all those colours were mixed together to create that really nice toadstool effect. And just make sure that that's... Just let me put that there a second, see if I can create... Hopefully that's a bit better. A little mushroom. Another way you can use this, well, it's the same way. So are we dry? Yes, we're probably dry. So what we need to do is we need to get so I have got, again, I'll put them in colour order. I've got bottle green. I don't think these are in order, beg your pardon. So if I just squish them forward a bit. We have sap green 49, juniper green 42, bottle green 43, mineral green 45, emerald green 46, grass green 47, may green 48, cedar green 50, and olive green 51. So we've got some olives, we've got some bright greens, and we've got some dark greens. And what you can do with this one is, again, you need quite a puddle of water there. Quite a puddle. But this is really good paper, so you can take it, so it's quite a puddle of water there. And that's why I got the colours out first, because you really want to be kind of ready for this. So, scalpel blade. Now I don't really want curls, I want just fine. If I can really get fine, I want fine. And so I'm not doing this, I'm doing this vertical on. I'll show how to do curls a bit later when we do stones. So we're going to have all these greens are going to be on this page. So you would think, oh, you can't do that. You've got 2, 4, 5, 9 colours. You've got 9 greens. You can't use 9 greens. It's impossible. But you see how just absolutely amazing this is. Now I do want that side here possibly to be a bit darker. And it works like a stencil because you only get colour where you've put water. Now, if we want to be a bit more dramatic, we can make this slightly lighter this side. And just so you can see the effect, we could put burnt carmine a little bit down here. And now we need a brush that will fan out, and I haven't got one, but I have a fan brush. So this isn't brilliant, but it's only the best I can do. So we want to wet it, and then we kind of want to dry it off a bit. I don't think I have a brush that will do that. Wait a minute, let me have a look. I might have. That's what you want. That's what you want, but I'm going to use this one. So it's wet, but it's damp. And then what you do is you just do this. Oops, that carmine was probably a little bit darker than I'd like. It should have been a brown, but I've got some really nice greens. If you want to lighten it up a bit, because it's still wet, and this is why having a long strip of colour is best. And again, I haven't done this for a long time, so you're just scratching, and you only need to do it once or twice, really. And you get kind of a grass effect. I think I kind of botched that up a bit, but never mind. Let's have a look for another bit. It wants to be a sprayed out brush, but it wanted to be a watercolour brush really, but you kind of trash your brushes when you do that. A softer brush probably might have been better, but I would have had to hold it and scratch it up. But that's the technique you use. And then I'll just do what David Cook did on the video here. And this is this is what he did. He drew a triangle and he had a tail on it. And again, this is what he did. I don't think I've got the right colours out. Again, you're scratching colour into that wet. If you want to get a little bit of warmth in there. And this does take a bit of practice and also colour wise as well. But you can do 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 colours like this. And then you go and you have a toadstool. And you then take a damp brush and manoeuvre the colour where you want. Either mix it all together or leave different things. Just activate a little bit if you want. And if you want a bit of dark, you can touch a bit like you can with any water-based colours and just darken things off a bit if you want to. Sorry, my hands don't work today, so you'd probably make it a bit neater than that. And you could make a toadstool. I mean, it's not a perfect toadstool, but it's an interpretation. So there's really, really nice things to do with watercolor pencils in a traditional watercolor way. You've got fine detail, you've got wispy. If I'd have done the grass properly, it would have been even better. Oopsie, sorry, I don't know what I've done there. Whoops. Oh, hi Beth, welcome to Bunny's Designs. These are professional watercolor pencils. They're Derwent watercolor pencils. This is an old set, so that's why it's in blue. I think they're all purple now. But this will move again, whereas Inktense, you can do this with Inktense, but then once it's dried, you wouldn't be able to reactivate it. But this is watercolor, so once it's dried, you can, just like an ordinary watercolor, you can go back in and work it, and if you go over the top, you will have a chance of reactivating. So this is watercolor, and again I can just re-wet this and I can get the colour. Now remember what I said about my little watercolour book, not to use watercolour paper to make your colour palettes, because that colour has soaked in. I can get some colour off, but a lot of that colour has soaked in the watercolour paper. Whereas in my little book, which is not far away, mine are exactly the same, and I have a lot of control from here. So what I'm going to do when I do this watercolor is I will be using the wet technique, and then I'll be using this as a paper palette, because it's a lot. I can mix these, but it's a lot more control, and I have 10 shades, so I might look at a color and think, oh well, I've only got that. But when you look at Madder Carmine, I've put my burnt carmine next to my Madder Carmine, and number 19 is there as well. So we've got 19 and 65, and number 15 is Geranium Lake. Now I have two Geranium Lakes because it's my favourite colour. Sorry. So because it's my favourite colour, I have two. But as you can see here, and especially with the flesh colour, I've used the flesh colour a lot. The flesh colour, I've got almost paper there, whereas here I don't. Now I know it's a bit stronger colour, but it works the same way. Here there's just a little bit of paint there. So when I've taken all this off, I think I've replenished them all, so I don't think there is one. Maybe the gold colour here. This is on good quality extra wet sketchbook paper, but the colour's sitting on top. The pencil is scribbled on top. So when it's wet, it still sits on top. If you made all your squares out of watercolour, half the colour would soak in. So your pencils, you're wasting half of your colour because it's soaking in. If that made any sense. So this is why this little book, whether it's got Inktense, Derwent watercolours, Graphitint, whatever it's got, colour 2s, it's all on sketchbook extra wet strength. So all that colour is literally sitting on top. None of it is going to soak in. But if you made it out of watercolour paper, two things. One is I'm such a tight Yorkshire lass that I don't want to waste my watercolour paper on here. And the other reason is it doesn't work as well. It will work, but you will lose quite a lot of your colour. I don't think a cardstock paper would do, Beth, because the reason this works, it's like a good quality sketchbook paper. Some papers will are designed for a wash. So you could do a light wash in some sketchbook papers, and that's why this is a sketchbook, a sea white, and at the back it's a little bit stronger, you can feel it, and it says extra wet, and that means you can use a damp brush on it. Normally with a sketchbook paper it's just for sketching with pencils or pen, but if it says extra wet it means, and you have a little water brush mark, it means you can use it for this, and the colour will sit on top. The only cardstock one I've used is a postcard, but it was a watercolour postcard, and that was for these. And I've stopped telling people about this section because it's blooming difficult to do. I've nearly sliced my fingers off, and I've been using a scalpel for 30-40 years. You're going to cut yourself. So I've stopped showing people how this is. But if your colours got to the bottom bit and you wanted to replace them, then you could do, and then you would just have a slither of your pan colours. In the back, I think this one is, again, because it's worked, I've used it. This is Professional Watercolours. So all these colours I have here, and they do go on this palette here. So as long as I clean this when I first use it, I haven't used it yet because I'm too busy playing with my other things. I've just put my Neos in. If I show you the gold, I think I replenished the gold one. But there's again the flesh one here. Whoopsie, sorry, there. If you can see, that's just paper. It's gone back to its sketchbook paper, whereas this one, it's soaked in. So, and it's cheaper than cardstock as well. I mean, you could try one and see if you like it. But I like this sketchbook paper because at first I thought it would disintegrate. When I first did them, I did them on individual squares because I thought the paper would just rot. Now, if you did watercolour, eventually it would. But for some reason, the sketchbook paper doesn't. This is the original one I made about 5 years ago, maybe quite a few years ago now. And again, you know, it takes quite a batting, and I just scribble colour back on top. So the graphic tint happened to be, oopsie, in this. I keep them in this art bag. So I have my Inktense pencils and I have my watercolour pencils. And I also, oops, dropped it, at the back have the graphic tint. There's 24 graphic tints. So these are like a pencil. They're like a graphite, but then they have a hint of colour. And again, if you look at these, you can't really see what there is. So when I do this, I have a colour swatch. So I know that that particular piece of palette, that paper palette, I can get all these shades. If you're using the pencil, you can probably get two, a pale and a full one. So let's have a look at number 2 is Juniper. So I can get the pencil out, double check it's number 2, sorry, it's number 1 port, and then scratch colour. And it's normally 2 or 3. When you start to see little bits of dust, you know that you're wasting your time. Probably just even 2 on this one. So Juniper is the next one, and this is how I replenish it. And now that's going to last me a while as well. Now I'm going to make some bigger squares of these because I'm going to start to use these more. But I do tend to use them out of my book. So instead of taking hundreds of pencils with me, off almost 1,000, I have about 600 or 700 colour squares now. But when you bear in mind that every square there are 10 shades, I've got 6,000 colours, and that doesn't include using these, which are traditional 6 set, or using the back ones either. These are just the colour swatches. And so I take this with me for when I'm colouring. They won't do a huge amount, but they'll do a fair distance. They cover a fair distance, shall we say. So I do like my little book of watercolours, but I've failed so many times on trying to fill this. And I think I'm just going to have to send them off as they are, because I just cannot cut these. It's just impossible to cut them. And which is why I don't really show people how to do that, because it's blooming dangerous. And I don't do things that are dangerous. So has anybody else got any questions? So thanks for joining me, guys. Hope you're all okay. Welcome, Beth. Hi, Claudia. Anybody else popping in? So I wanted to play with these watercolours. So there's lots of different ways you can use it. And again, it's buckled this, and this is quite strong, this one. But it has buckled it because it wasn't stretched. So you can scratch and use paper palettes and mix your colours together. Another favourite of mine is, and I'll just do this really quickly, because I think there is an ultramarine blue. I think they have a blue. We've got an ultramarine, number 29. And as you can see, it's 3 good coats. Gives you a fairly decent thing. So that's quite enough, and that's what I do on my colour squares. Any more and you'll start to kind of mess things up. So we've got ultramarine, and I have a chocolate brown. What are my other browns? Let me have a look. Copper Beach will be too light. Sepia. Sepia is quite a dark one. That's probably like a burnt umber. Oops, you see what I mean. But I'm not going to get rid of this because it's pure colour. And I'm going to show you that in a different thing in a minute. This is a wash now. But on this side, I'll just do this one. Now this is called chocolate, so this is a little bit darker. My hands don't work particularly well, and they do squeak because I don't have a point on them. So this one is the colder brown, I think. I just wanted to show you the difference very quickly. I always tend to end up colouring something. I've just put my little book somewhere. So chocolate is, I have to label mine now because I've got so many. Chocolate is 64, so that's chocolate. Now this is a bit colder, the camera's a bit colder, so the other one I did was Copper Beach. Now I do seem to have a burnt umber somewhere. That's burnt carmine. I don't know what I've done with burnt umber, it must be out somewhere. Burnt sienna is warmer. Right, so there's a burnt umber. So I'm actually going to put this one, here because I think it's burnt umber. And then we'll have French ultramarine. So that one is number 29, ultramarine. That one is 53, sepia. And then I did chocolate, which is 66. And that one was 29. So all these are going into a sketchbook, a special book, so I can remember what I'm doing. So I didn't really want this big thick brush. I'll do the number 2. Just have some water. So if you mix these two together, exactly half and half, you've got a blue-grey. If you go slightly that way, you're going to have still a cool grey. So that's the grey. Then we've got, oops, it's a bit wet, but never mind. So you can have the chocolate dark grey. So if you had a chocolate colour here, adding the French ultramarine would make a gorgeous shadow because it's matching, it's just a tone darker. But if we take that back up there, that's Payne's grey. So if we mix these two together, and again slightly more blue than brown, I think that one's Payne's grey. Payne's grey is burnt umber and French ultramarine, and you get some gorgeous greys. But if you went beside the bluey side, you would have a cooler grey. That one's always a midnight grey, indigo blue, that I would call that indigo blue. So you can make indigo blue. If you don't have indigo blue, which is a very dark midnight dark sky, you could take your French ultramarine and a brown and take it to the blue side, and you will get a blue midnight tint. If you take it to the brown side, just you will get Payne's grey. If you take it further, you get a blue grey. If you go the other way, you get that gorgeous dark over here. You'll get a very, very nutty dark brown, so the dark shadows on a bark of the tree. So you can get 3 different shades depending on which side you're at. A direct middle would be the dark brown. Then you've got it would be Payne's grey. The bluey one would be a midnight blue, indigo, and then the browner one would be a very, very dark. I think it's slightly darker. I think it's more like Van Dyke brown. Van Dyke brown is slightly darker and deeper than burnt umber, I think, if you look on the colour wheel. But I love making my own greys. I just have this thing about making my own greys and blacks. And taking a purple and adding its complementary colour will make a shadow. So never mix grey. It's very rare that I use grey. So a bit more about the colours. I kind of like this. It's dried now, so I can take this masking fluid off, hopefully. And that's left me the little window ready to, oh, it's flashed out. Ready for me. Now I did mess up this, so I'll do this again. Very quickly I'll do this, because I did mess it up a bit. But this video that I've seen with this on is from the late 80s, early 90s, so it's a long time since I've seen this video. So we want greens. So normally with colours, watercolours, you can't mix a lot of colours, but here this is quite wet. If you can see that it's quite. So I'm going to wet it again. And again, because you've stretched your paper, you wouldn't do this like this, you'd stretch your paper, otherwise it would buckle. You've got some really wet puddles of colour there. And then you're just scratching. And this is good for beaches, for pebbles. I'll very quickly do pebbles, although I think I've done pebbles. And dry stone walls. This is brilliant for dry stone walls, because you could mix Hagrid's house actually would be good because you could get all those colours that I had before. So again, if you want a paler area, I've got some big curls on here, but normally you would just want little. I don't think I'm going to put any brown in. And I will try it with a, if it'll do this brush. You spray it out. And then obviously grass goes upwards. Just see if we can bring that back to focus. And you've got quite a nice grass effect. And why the colour should just go now, I have no idea, so apologies. So we've got kind of a pseudo grass effect. Just by doing this. You don't want to do it twice because you mess up the nice area you've got, but once would be fine. And it doesn't look anything like that really, but never mind. Oh my goodness. Right. So that was just a really, really quick play with the Derwent watercolour pencils. Thank you for watching.